I'm in a Roman ruin, yet I'm not in Italy. Where in the world could I be? Toni on Libya, right now. The country of Libya is located on the North African continent between neighboring Egypt and Tunisia. It is perhaps best known for its unusual leader, Muammar Gaddafi, and its ties to terrorism, with the infamous bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 in late December of 1988. Just this year, the U.S. has begun lifting economic sanctions and allowing Americans to visit this Muslim country for the first time in over 20 years.
Do you fear that your regime may be ended by a coup?
In 1985, journalist Robert McNeil interviewed the colonel, covering topics from sanctions to tourism. I have the privilege of traveling with him on this historic journey where he shared some of his insight into the man and the country.
Muammar Gaddafi was accused by the U.S., and there's pretty good evidence for it, of fomenting terrorism, backing terrorism, killing his own enemies abroad, and most notoriously, Libyans were behind the explosion of Pan Am 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland. And after denying it all for years, Gaddafi has suddenly, tacitly begun admitting all this, paying reparations, and each stage of that, the U.S. lifts a little more the sanctions the U.S. and the United Nations imposed.
Getting there will be no easy task. We begin our journey in Malta. But it's not every day we're in Malta, so let's take a moment to look around. Come on. Situated in the Mediterranean between Europe and North Africa and only about 400 square kilometers, Malta has been inhabited for over 5,000 years. Stone Age and Bronze Age communities left impressive structures on the Maltese landscape. Valletta is the capital city and provides the main port. And what better way to get around than in a horse and buggy? Early inhabitants in this region were Phoenicians, Greeks, and Carthaginians. Roman rule followed, lasting until the 5th century. Throughout its diverse history, Malta has been ruled by foreign invaders. Where do we begin? There were the Arabs, the Germans, the Sicilians, the Spaniards, and the French. Then finally the Brits acquired it. Now a republic, Malta retains its link with the UK by becoming a member of the British Commonwealth. The republic consists of the island of Malta, the islands of Gozo, and Comino. We are now off to see Casa Rocca Piccola, the home of a Maltese baron and the only historic home in Malta open to the public. We've been invited for a visit, so let's not keep them waiting. Casa Rocca Piccola is the lived-in home of the De Piros, an ancient Maltese family. The history of Casa Rocca Piccola goes back over 400 years to an era in which the Knights of St. John decided to build themselves a prestigious city to rival European capitals. A visit to Casa Rocca Piccola gives us an opportunity to see inside one of the last private, unconverted Valletta palaces still lived in today, depicting what 16th century life in Malta was like. Palaces were designed for prestige and aesthetic beauty in most of Valletta's carefully planned streets, and great bastion walls fortified the new 16th century city. Right across in our view, we have a 400-year-old fort. Next, we're off to Medina, the original capital of Malta before the arrival of the Knights of St. John in the Middle Ages. Medina, the Arabic word for city, is situated on a rocky outcrop about 9 miles west of Valletta, and its origins can be traced back 4,000 years. It was once a Phoenician town, but spent periods under Roman, Arabic, and Norman occupation. Ceramic tiles bearing street names adorn its well-worn walls, but for a fairly bustling spot, the city has a misleading moniker. Historian David Barnes fills us in. They say this is the city of silence.
Yes, I've wondered about that. It must be when the tour groups go home in the evening, I think. Apparently only 400 people live here now. But I think it goes back to the old Arabic architecture, all these narrow little streets and, generally speaking, a lack of traffic inside the city.
When visiting Malta, one can't help but think of the classic American film, The Maltese Falcon. But from where does the title hail? Could Medina solve this mystery?
That goes back to the time of the Knights of St. John. When they were kicked out of the Levant, they went first to Rhodes and then they had nowhere to go. And Charles V gave them the island of Malta for the token rent of one Maltese falcon a year. That's where it comes from.
That's where it comes from? Pretty cheap rent.
They got a pretty good deal.
But what makes Medina so unique? It is here in the Baroque Cathedral of St. Paul that you can attend a Catholic Mass, but pray to Allah.
This is an incredibly devout Catholic population, and that's fascinating because they all go to Mass and they still cover themselves. The word they're using for God in their prayers is Allah, because the language they're speaking is Arabic, from the Arabic period.
A beautiful church occupies the center of every Maltese town. One of the largest in Europe is St. Mary's in the central town of Mosta, with its glorious blue, gold, and white dome. Yes, an incredible cathedral, but this church also boasts an incredible story. It is here on a Sunday in 1942, while some 300 people were inside praying, that a bomb fell through the church's dome and bounced into the sacristy. And as history has us believe, it is now known as the Miracle Bomb.
They dropped the bomb that hit exactly on the dome of the church, perforated the dome, hit a wall, bounced off, and came into this part of the building. And it didn't explode, it was a dud, and there were 300 people in the church, and they considered it, of course, a miracle. The whole church didn't fall down, nobody was killed, even with the bomb running around in the church.
The busy street outside this church leads to the harbor, where our ship, the 300-foot MS Endeavour, patiently awaits our arrival. And once the lines are tossed, she slowly gets underway. Our first day in the Mediterranean comes to a close as we leave Malta. Overnight, Endeavour will chart a course for our historic rendezvous with the country of Libya. Coming up, a gander at Gaddafi, we find the fish market, and slip into Sabratha. Next on Toni On Libya.